somehow the problem is not that he is killing presumably innocent people, because there's not been one shred of evidence that these are illicit drug boats or anything like that. And so the objection that the Democrats have is not that presumably innocent people are being slaughtered, but that he didn't seek congressional approval. That is their
Yeah,
objection. You know what had congressional approval? The genocide in Gaza. You know what had
exactly.
congressional approval? The Afghanistan invasion. You know what had congressional approval? The Iraq invasion. So the congressional approval is not some sort of seal of morality, but it's exactly the opposite. And it shows you that Trump and the right wing and the Republican Party and the Democratic Party they have cosmetic differences, but as far as the agenda of imperialism and exploiting billions of working class people, they are completely united.
And I always try to avoid just casting blame on just the president. Everyone loves to do that. Always made it clear that it was Joe Biden and the Democratic Party that was funding Jen. So they love the scapegoats. Like, it's not just Donald Trump waging war against Venezuela. This is Marco Rubio's lifetime project, fam. This is the project of every single Gusano traitor, every single anti-communist has been salivating to destroy the legacy of Hugo Chavez by force if necessary. So there was Democrats who forced a measure so the president would have to seek congressional approval in strikes in Venezuela. And every single Republican, I think Rand Paul was like one of the only two senators who voted against it. So I want people to understand it's not just Donald Trump's war. This is the war of the United States Senate. This is why I didn't like the No King rally, because you guys know I'm a fucking nitpicky nerd. Like, Donald Trump isn't a king. He's doing the bidding of Lindsey Graham, of Mike Johnson. His legislation is approved of by the capitalist dictatorship. So when liberals say stuff like no kings, it's meant to confuse. It's actually very anti-theory in a lot of ways. It's meant to muddy the waters in class warfare. No kings. Like, look, you guys had people like Nancy Pelosi who damn near died in office. Dianne Feinstein who died in office. You guys talk about no king. No, the problem is capitalism. But here's the Senate who blocked the measure that would have forced Donald Trump to seek congressional approval, which is essentially the Senate approving of the strikes in Venezuela. And to wrap up, I found this interview with Adam Smith. He gave this interview with the Atlantic Council. So you guys know, as someone who is a campaign surrogate of Shama Sawan, I have my eyes on Adam Smith like a hawk. So he gave this interview. I'm like, oh my God. And it's just as you expect from a neocon Democrat. And I explained to you guys that the criticism that these Democrats have of Donald Trump isn't the military action itself. It's that he's not going through the proper channels, that he's not seeking congressional approval. So in this interview, and I highly suggest you guys check it out, because his interview is just as deranged as you would think from this vampire-looking neocon. Well, he explained that drug trafficking gangs in the Western Hemisphere is a problem for our national security. Pause. Shut the fuck up. You guys see how Democrats, while critiquing Trump, legitimizes his imperialist actions? He says we have narco states down there. I know it's hard to see for you guys. Actually, I think I can make it bigger. Let me see if I can, so you guys can see it too. He said we got budding narco states down there. They're having a harder and harder time dealing with that. We need to be engaged and involved in that. What? What are you talking about? You guys see how and you guys see in the next paragraph, he's critical of Donald Trump because he's not going through the right protocols. The position of a lot of the Congress people is like, man, can you give me an opportunity to vote for this war? But what I want you to respond to, because you have that, but you also have the worldview of Adam Smith that is exposed to it. And I want you to comment on this, Shama. In a time where the American working class is struggling, there are millions of people that are homeless. We have our infrastructure that's falling apart. Adam Smith is still endorsing spending billions of dollars on military presence abroad. So Shama, pay attention to this. Look, I think one of the mistakes that we have made is to assume that our global presence is just a cost that isn't benefiting us. Adam Smith says a United States deployment abroad. And you know what he wants us to be worried about? And this just shows the neocon ideology that must be defeated. Citing threats posed by Russia, China, and Iran? Fam, is Russia responsible for the crisis in medical debt that the American working class is going through? Is Iran responsible for the fact that 69%, according to a recent poll, show that 69% of Americans are working and living paycheck to paycheck? Is that because of China? So sorry for the rant, but Shama, I want to hear your thoughts. But you guys see how Adam Smith, to this day, this is an interview that just came out 2 days ago, is justifying United States military presence worldwide and says that we have to stay engaged to counter Russia, China, and Iran. So are these people truly oppositional to Trump? Shama, sorry for the rant. I would love for you to respond to this.
Oh no, I love that rant. I love that rant, and it's really important you brought this up, Nick, because this not only exposes Adam Smith himself, but also shows you once again, that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are both parties of war, genocide, bloodshed, and imperialism, and the exploitation of the global working class, both the US and international working class. That is the agenda that they represent. And so, yeah, it is completely horrendous that their objection, and I've seen interviews of other Democrats as well in the context of Trump's attacks on these boats in the Caribbean waters, that somehow the problem is not that he is killing presumably innocent people, because there's not been one shred of evidence that these are illicit drug boats or anything like that. And so the objection that the Democrats have is not that presumably innocent people are being slaughtered, but that he didn't seek congressional approval. That is their objection. You know what had congressional approval? The genocide in Gaza. You know what had congressional approval? The Afghanistan invasion. You know what had congressional approval? The Iraq invasion. So the congressional approval is not some sort of seal of morality, but it's exactly the opposite. And it shows you that Trump and the right wing and the Republican Party and the Democratic Party they have cosmetic differences, but as far as the agenda of imperialism and exploiting billions of working class people, they are completely united. And look at what he's saying from the article you shared, Nick. Literally, Adam Smith is saying, I don't think simply committing this large number of assets, hundreds of millions, probably billions of dollars by the time it's done, to blow up some drug boats in international waters is going to make an appreciable difference in the fight against drug trafficking. Notice this. So he is on exactly the same page as Trump and the Republicans and Marco Rubio. He's on the same page as all of them, that this is all about stopping drug trafficking. And he has a logistical and a fiscal question about it. Like, I don't think that's a good use of money. We need more things to come out of billion. Like, he wants more bloodshed out of those billions of dollars. And look at what he says about the so-called National Defense Authorization Act. I say so-called because it's military and warfare kind of, and it funds the genocide and all that. He says that he says that what he's implying is that there's a risk of not moving fast enough with military endeavors. So in other words, this guy,
what the fuck?
He's not happy with the pace that Trump is carrying out. He says it's too slow. Let's do more. Do more here.
That's crazy, fam.
It's completely crazy. And look at the facts. The United States is if anything, it is the world's biggest money laundering machine for global drug trafficking. And This is, it's like a reincarnation of what probably happened in the 60s and 70s and so on, with the stories that we've heard before of things that happened before us, where the imperialist project against Latin America was, in order to crush any kind of working class organizing, any kind of labor militancy in Latin America. That was done in the name of the war on drugs. It was done in the name of trying to defeat all these supposedly nefarious forces. But in reality, what the real agenda was, that if there's any semblance of the left in Latin America, that poses a threat for US imperialism. And so that's what you're seeing. And that is absolutely a bipartisan agenda for both the Democrats and Republicans.
So apparently they have like a 1 hour version of this interview, and there's no way in hell I would ever watch this. But you guys see that we're just getting started. Like we're gonna be cooking Adam Smith this entire year, Shama. We're gonna, because I've been watching this guy like a hawk, and his best campaign strategy would be to pull Kamala Harris. I would say just to pull Joe Biden. Try to stay away from the media, because the more he give interviews, the more unhinged he's seen. And I don't know, maybe it's just maybe it's because I've been following him more, but I swear I've been seeing him on corporate media more. I know they see the shadow of your campaign, Chama. I see them subtly try to prop this guy up. This guy, I've never seen this guy before. All of a sudden, he's on CNN. I've seen him on MSNBC. The Atlantic Council's propping him up. So we got to defeat this unhinged neocon, because this interview he gave, I guess this is the video version. God, who would watch this? Who would watch this hour dribble, neocon dribble? The Atlantic, I guess they summed up his points here. I just now realized I had the video there. But man, this interview is horrific. This is the person who Shama's running against. And it's going to be very telling. I know Shama got to be diplomatic, but I don't have to be. But it's going to be very telling, all the people who mobilized for Zoran, whether they're going to be on board with defeating this monster. This guy called Americans who protested against Israel fascist. Or are they going to stay on the sidelines? If Zoran doesn't even send out a tweet, what does that say? What does that say if all the Zoran surrogates refuse to support Shama Sawant challenging this psychopath simply because she's running as an independent? We'll be watching you guys the same way I'll be watching Adam Smith. Shama, I'll give you last thoughts. It's always great to have you on, especially to end it on a Friday. One of my favorite guests. We can discuss theory and this kind of stuff all night, but we can end it here. Any final messages? Any way people can support your campaign? I'll give you final thoughts as we wrap up. Always great doing shows with you, Shama. Thank you for joining us.
Likewise, Nick, always a pleasure to speak with you. I'm so grateful you're having me on, and I look forward to more conversations, and also building the congressional campaign alongside you. First of all, everybody who's watching this, if you agree with us, then you should join our campaign, because this is a national campaign. It doesn't matter where you live in the United States. If you want a fight back against the forces of imperialism, if you want to fight back to win free healthcare for all funded by taxing the rich, if you are angry about the genocide and want to fight to end all US military aid to Israel, then you should join our campaign. Our campaign is also calling for national rent control. We're also calling for a federal $25 an hour minimum wage. And in big cities, we think the minimum wage should be at least $30 an hour. So this is what we're fighting for. And you can see from our just absolutely unparalleled track record in Seattle that we keep our promises. And the reason we do it is because we're not talking about electing a person for some individual career and a life of comfort. We are talking about using this elected position as a platform, a vehicle to build militant mass movement. And we know we can do this nationally. We've seen the Italian working class and other sections of the working class internationally show that it is possible to build that kind of fight back. But it's not going to happen this type of militant fight back is not going to come. It's certainly not going to come from the parties of capitalism, the Democrats and Republicans, but it's also not going to come from the leadership of the labor movement today in America, because they are what I would call business unionist, which is they are tied to making peace with the bosses, which also means making peace with the bosses' agenda, imperialism, bosses' parties. And so that fight back we have to build from the outside, and rank and file union members have to join us. The reason I'm putting a fine point on this is that going into the midterms, we have to remind everyone that a big part of the working class fight back during the midterm elections has to be rank and file union members fighting against the leadership who will do what they do every single year, which is pour millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars into Democratic races. Some of them, like Sean O'Brien of the Teamsters, are even worse than that. They are gone over to the Trump and the Josh Hawley side. And so we have to fight for independent, socialist, working class agendas. And in relation to Adam Smith, what has happened? The labor leadership has spent 3 decades giving no strings attached endorsements and campaign funds to Democrats like Adam Smith.
That's
And in
crazy.
turn, yeah, absolutely. He has received over $500,000 from labor unions since he first went to the US Congress. It is utterly shameful. Last year, as he was
That's
voting
crazy.
for the genocide, the labor leadership was endorsing him. Recently, just in the summer, some of the labor leaders, they held of can you imagine, they held a food related feast and fundraiser for a guy who voted to ban food assistance from Gaza. I mean, it could not be more poetic. It almost seems like somebody wrote this script for a show on Netflix. That's how poetic it was. Here he is, the guy who's voting for a genocide, voting to ban United Nations food assistance to the people. And here you have labor leaders celebrating him, bringing food from various restaurants and saying, hey, come and eat with us. We protested outside that fundraiser. We held Worker Strike Back, and my campaign held a pots and pans fundraiser. A protest. We banged on our pots and pans and said, how grotesque is it that any section of the labor leadership would actually not only support but celebrate a guy who has voted for mass starvation? This is the antithesis of what the union movement needs to stand for, which is international working class solidarity. So let's use this midterm election year to show a real example of international working class solidarity by building this campaign and defeating Adam Smith.